justice. Fight for. Fight for. When I say shut down, you say Tarzan. Shut down. Shut down. Right here. It is with great humility and honor that I'd just like to express my profound gratitude to be a part, of launching, this movement here, in Canada and across Mother Earth, in the fight for climate justice. We're all a part of it as young people born in this generation. And my name's Clayton, and I'm a Cree man. I come from a reserve in northern Manitoba called Pugadawagan, also known as Matthias Cologne Cree Nation. Yeah. And I'm the tar sands campaign organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network, which is a North American network for environmental justice, representing about 250 Indigenous communities across Turtle Island, what we refer to as North America. And our purpose and responsibility since 1990, when we were founded in the heartland of the Navajo Nation down in Arizona, is to fight to protect the sacredness of Mother Earth from toxic contamination and corporate exploitation. And so, let me just fix my mic. Hold on a second here. We're doing our own tech stuff here, grassroots. Oh yeah. There's a white elephant in the room. There's a white elephant in the room, and in every room, in every circle, whether I'm kicking it with the folks in the labor movement, whether I'm hanging out with my homies in the environmental movement, whether I'm kicking it, in the EJ, circles that I travel within, the environmental justice circles, there's a white elephant in the room. And I've come here tonight to name that white elephant with all of you. And its name is tar sands. And tar sands is the main reason why Canada will not meet its commitments to Kyoto, and why it's working with other developed nations, other developed bullies, as I like to call them, to freeze any kind of agreement coming out of COP15 in Denmark this December. It's also the reason why Canada refuses to ratify the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The tar sands. Come on, you say it now. Tar sands. Okay, when I say the, you say tar sands. The tar sands. Exactly. Indigenous peoples in Canada and the United States and throughout the Americas hold valuable land and water resources that have long been exploited by the provincial, state, and federal governments, and by corporations trying to meet the energy needs of an industrialized world. Indigenous peoples have disproportionately suffered impacts due to the production and use of energy resources, yet are among those who benefit the least from these energy developments. Indigenous peoples face inequity over the control of and access to sustainable energy and energy services. And territories where our people live are resource rich, and they serve as the base from which governments and corporations extract wealth, yet are areas where the most severe forms of poverty exist. And our impoverishment here in Canada is a direct result of Canada not recognizing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the minimum standard that our people ask for respect, or our Aboriginal treaty rights as human rights here in this country. Everything comes from the land. Canada's economy is based on legitimized stealing of our land under the colonial doctrines of discovery. Canada's wealth is based upon recognizing that we as First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people own our traditional and treaty territories. And this is the fundamental issue that is at stake: our human right as Indigenous peoples to our Aboriginal and treaty territories. That is the crux, that is our main issue. Climate change. Climate change is having a disproportionate impact on some communities across Canada, particularly First Nations communities and other Aboriginal communities, communities of color, and low-income and working-class communities. And so we face a problem today. because the goals, leadership, and activities of the environmental movement do not accurately reflect the disproportionate impact of climate change according to the leadership of these communities that I've just outlined. And leaders of disproportionately affected communities feel that the environmental movement leaders are proposing and advocating climate change policies that do not reflect the realities of their communities. So entire subpopulations of Canadians do not see themselves or their realities reflected in the environmental movement, which is one of the reasons why they're not engaged. Now, climate justice is a movement from the grassroots, bottom up, to realize solutions to all of our climate and energy problems that ensure the right of all of us, of all people, to live, work, play, and pray in a safe, healthy, and clean environment. Climate justice envisions a just transition to a future free from fossil fuels that protects the most vulnerable from the impacts of climate change. There is an urgent need for policymakers in Canada to understand the inextricable link between Indigenous rights and energy and climate impacts, and in turn make that the basis of provincial, national, and international policy changes. Now, Canadian and Alberta history. Alberta. Oh, another white elephant in the room. Oh, I love everybody here from Alberta. I love you all. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Mike. Okay. Sorry, it's Canadian and Alberta history has seriously hampered First Nations' ability to retain their inherent sovereignty rights, to protect lands, culture, and to maintain economically sustainable and healthy communities. In the words of many elders and land-based community members in the tar sands area, concern of jobs, housing, income, and economic development has become the priority over the traditional Indigenous values of respecting the sacredness of Mother Earth for the protection and for the protection of the environment. There is an urgent need for a coordinated and collective response led by First Nations and Métis peoples to the tar sands development. An organizing framework based on human rights, supporting the establishment of a movement for a moratorium on the tar sands development absolutely must be put into place, and it's definitely underway, as many of you have been seeing in the national and international media. Now, this moratorium should be in effect until the concerns of First Nations and Métis peoples living in the area pertaining to human rights abuses, the human and ecological health crisis, the climate change implications, the water and air quality implications, and the tribal sovereignty and self-determination implications, and the cumulative socioeconomic impacts on the health and way of life of Indigenous peoples in the regions can be taken into account, responded to, respected, and protected in a permanent traditional Indigenous framework that complies with our spiritual and natural laws and our treaty and inherent rights. Now, across Canada and across Mother Earth, we have witnessed how fragile the economy based on centralized interdependent systems are, by witnessing them come closer and closer to collapse. Here in Canada, if you look at the demographics, by 2016, 1 out of every 4 workers in Canada will be Aboriginal. 3/4 of the 1.8 million Native people that live in this country are under the age of 30. 50% are under the age of 25. That's insane. So there's going to be a fundamental shift in Canada's labor market and in our political and economic power. So in that context, there's a lot to be said about the need for the labor struggle and the Indigenous struggle to come together to push for systematic change around a new energy economy and questions of climate adaptation and mitigation. Now we are seeing a crisis here in Ontario. We've been seeing it for a couple of years now in the manufacturing sector. And Ontario has traditionally been the economic powerhouse of Canada, the backbone, if you will, of our economy.